What would you do if you fired the one person your children truly needed, not because she did something wrong, but because someone else convinced you she had? And 3 days later, standing in the silence of a house that used to feel alive, you found a box she left behind that showed you everything she'd been doing for your family that you never even knew about? That's what happened to Marcus Cole. And what he did next was something no amount of pride could stop. But before we get into this story, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from right now. Trust me, you're going to want to stay for this one. Let's get into it. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 4:17 to be exact. Marcus would remember the time because of how fast it was over. Elena was in the kitchen when he called her into the living room. She came in drying her hands on her apron, the way she always did when interrupted mid-task, calm, unhurried, that particular steadiness she carried with her everywhere like it was built into her posture. She had been working in the house for 7 months, arrived through an agency after Marcus had gone through 3 housekeepers in a year, quiet woman, late 20s, kept her hair pulled back, spoke only when something needed to be said, and moved through the house with an efficiency that never felt cold. The children had taken to her within the first week. His daughter, Ava, who was 10 and trusted almost no one, had started sitting in the kitchen while Elena worked. His son, Noah, who was 7 and had been struggling with reading since kindergarten, had stopped hiding his homework under the bed. Marcus stood in the living room with his arms crossed and said the words he'd rehearsed in his head for an hour. "Elena, I need to let you go. Effective immediately." She didn't flinch, didn't gasp. Her face went still for a moment, the way a lake goes still before wind moves across it. She looked at him with those steady eyes and said, "May I ask why?" And Marcus, who ran a company worth $600 million and made decisions that affected thousands of people, couldn't look her in the face when he answered. "It's just not working out," he said. The biggest lie he had told in years, and both of them knew it. She had been in Marcus's life for 5 months, beautiful in the way that demanded attention when she walked into a room. Confident, polished, always dressed like the next photograph was about to be taken. She worked in real estate, had her own money, her own circle, and a particular way of watching people that Marcus had initially mistaken for intelligence. It was Vanessa who had planted the seed, not all at once, slowly, the way someone waters a doubt until it looks like a conclusion. It started with small comments. "She's very comfortable here, isn't she?" said while watching Elena pour juice for the kids. "Does she always stay this late?" asked on a Thursday when Elena was helping Noah with his reading at the kitchen table. "I just think it's a little much, Marcus. She's the housekeeper, not their mother." Each comment landed lightly, none of them heavy enough to respond to on their own. But together, over weeks, they built something. A frame around Elena that made her presence look like overreach instead of care, like ambition instead of kindness. The final push came on Monday night. Vanessa was lying beside him in bed, scrolling her phone, and said without looking up, "Ava told me today that she likes Elena more than she likes me." She paused, let the sentence sit, then added, "I'm just saying, Marcus, you should think about what kind of dynamic you're creating in this house." Marcus didn't answer, but he thought about it all night, and by Tuesday morning, the decision was made. Not because he believed Elena had done anything wrong, but because it was easier to remove the person causing tension than to examine where the tension was actually coming from. Elena took the news without argument. She asked if she could say goodbye to the children. Marcus said it was better if she didn't, another decision he'd replay in his head for days. She nodded, went to the kitchen, removed her apron, folded it, placed it on the counter with a neatness that felt like a sentence she wasn't going to say out loud. She picked up her bag from the hook by the service entrance, put on her coat, and walked to the front door. At the door, she stopped, didn't turn around, just stood there for 2 seconds with her hand on the handle. Then she opened it and left. The click of that door was the quietest and loudest sound Marcus had heard in a long time. The first sign came that same evening. Ava came downstairs at 6:30 for dinner, looked at the kitchen, looked at the empty hook where Elena's apron usually hung, and said, "Where's Elena?" Marcus was sitting at the counter with his laptop open. He didn't look up. "She's not going to be working here anymore?" Ava stood perfectly still. The kind of still that a 10-year-old becomes when she's processing something she doesn't want to accept but already understands. Why? It just wasn't the right fit. Ava looked at him with an expression he recognized. It was the same look she'd given him 2 years ago when he told her that her mother had moved to another state and wouldn't be living with them anymore. Not anger. Something worse. The quiet registering of a loss she had no power to prevent. She turned around, went back upstairs, and didn't come down for dinner. Noah's reaction was different, but cut just as deep. He didn't ask about Elena that night. He didn't ask the next morning either. He simply stopped doing things. Stopped coming to the kitchen table for breakfast, stopped leaving his room before being called 3 times. When the new temporary housekeeper the agency sent on Wednesday tried to serve him lunch, he looked at the plate, pushed it away, and said, "That's not how she does it," with a flatness that wasn't rude. It was grief. By Wednesday evening, Marcus was sitting in a house that had every appearance of functioning and felt completely hollow. The cook made dinner. The temporary housekeeper cleaned the rooms. The schedule ran on time. Nothing was technically wrong, but something essential had left with Elena, something that couldn't be replaced by filling her position. Ava ate almost nothing for 2 days. She sat at the table, moved food around her plate, and excused herself early. Marcus watched her from across the table each time and felt a growing pressure in his chest that he kept pushing down because acknowledging it meant acknowledging its cause. Noah stopped reading entirely. The books Elena had been working through with him sat in a stack on his desk, untouched, with a bookmark still holding the last page they'd reached together. Thursday morning, Marcus stood in the hallway outside Noah's closed door, listening to silence, and thought for the first time, clearly and without defense, that he had made a terrible mistake. He found it on Thursday afternoon. He wasn't looking for it. He was in the utility room off the kitchen searching for a light bulb when he noticed a cardboard box on the lower shelf, tucked behind cleaning supplies. Plain brown, no label, not large. The kind of box someone leaves when they pack in a hurry and forget one thing, or when they leave something behind on purpose because it was never theirs to take. Marcus pulled it out and set it on the kitchen counter. Inside were 3 things. The first was a stack of handwritten cards. Index cards, maybe 40 of them, held together with a rubber band. Each one had a word on the front and a small drawing on the back. Simple illustrations, a tree for branch, a window for glass, a clock for minute. Every card was made with careful handwriting and colored pencil drawings that must have taken hours. At the top of the stack, a small note in Elena's handwriting said, "For Noah, 1 new word every day." He remembers better with pictures. Marcus stood in his kitchen holding those cards and couldn't move. The second item was a growth chart. A single sheet of paper, hand-drawn, with dates running down the left side and small horizontal marks tracking height. Ava's name was written at the top in neat letters. The chart went back 5 months. Every 2 weeks, a new measurement. At the bottom, Elena had written, "She grew 1.2 inches since March. She was proud when I told her." Nobody had been tracking Ava's growth. Not Marcus. Not the pediatrician, whose visits Marcus kept postponing. Not anyone. Except the woman he had fired without letting her say goodbye. The third item broke him. A letter. 1 page, handwritten, never delivered. Addressed to Mr. Cole. It read, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this or if it's my place, but Noah came home last Tuesday with a bruise on his arm he didn't want to show anyone. I asked him carefully, and he told me 2 boys at school have been taking his lunch and pushing him in the hallway. He asked me not to tell you because he doesn't want you to think he's weak. I don't think he's weak, but I think he needs his father to know." Marcus read that letter standing in his kitchen at 3 in the afternoon. Read it once. Read it again. Then set it down on the counter and pressed both hands flat against the surface because the ground beneath him didn't feel solid anymore. He went to Noah's room first. Knocked once. No answer. Opened the door and found the boy sitting on his bed with his tablet in his lap, not playing anything, just holding it with the screen dark. The stack of books on his desk untouched. The bookmark still in place. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. Noah didn't look up. "Hey, buddy." Nothing. "Can I see your arm?" Noah's body went still. That particular stillness of a child who realizes a secret he tried to keep has been found. He didn't resist when Marcus gently rolled up his sleeve. The bruise was fading, yellow-green at the edges, a week old at least, exactly where the letter said it would be. Marcus looked at his son's arm, at the evidence of something that had been happening while he sat in boardrooms making deals, and felt a nausea that had nothing to do with his stomach. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, keeping his voice as level as he could manage. Noah shrugged with one shoulder. Small. Careful. "You're always busy." 3 words, delivered without accusation, without drama. Just a fact stated by a 7-year-old who had already learned that his father's attention was a limited resource and that certain things didn't qualify. Marcus sat with his son for 40 minutes, longer than he'd sat with him in months. Noah eventually talked. Not a lot. Enough. 2 boys in his class. Started in the cafeteria. Got worse after recess. Elena was the only one who noticed because she was the only one who checked. When Marcus left Noah's room, he went to Ava's door. She was lying on her bed reading a book. She looked up, and her face did something complicated, half wanting him there, half not forgiving him for Tuesday. "I found Elena's growth chart," he said from the doorway. Ava's eyes changed. "She measured me every 2 weeks. She said girls should know they're growing even when nobody else notices." That sentence landed in Marcus's chest and stayed there. He went downstairs, sat at the kitchen counter with the box in front of him. The cards, the chart, the letter. 3 objects made by a woman who was paid to clean his house and had instead paid attention to the 2 people in it who needed it most. And the person who had convinced him to send her away was coming over for dinner in 3 hours. Vanessa arrived at 7. Black dress, heels, perfume that announced her before she entered a room. She kissed Marcus on the cheek, set her bag on the counter, and immediately noticed the box. "What's that?" "Things Elena left behind," Marcus said. Vanessa glanced at the contents with the brief attention of someone assessing whether something was worth her time. She picked up one of the index cards, looked at the drawing on the back, and set it down. "Cute," she said. Nothing more. Marcus watched her say that word, watched the way she held the card like it was a grocery receipt, and something that had been building inside him for 3 days clicked into place with a precision that was almost audible. They sat down for dinner. Ava didn't come downstairs. Noah came, ate 4 bites, and asked to be excused. Vanessa watched him leave and said, "He's been moody lately. Kids go through phases." Marcus set down his fork. "He's being bullied at school." Vanessa looked up. "What? Since when?" "Weeks. Elena knew. She wrote me a letter about it. I never got it because she was gone before she could give it to me." There was a silence at the table that felt different from any they'd shared before. Not comfortable, not tense in the usual way. This silence had a clarity to it, the clarity of someone seeing a pattern for the first time after staring at it for months. "Marcus, you can't blame yourself for—" "I'm not blaming myself," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that stopped her mid-sentence. "I'm asking myself why I fired a woman who noticed my son was being hurt when no one else in this house did, including me, including you." Vanessa's expression shifted. The composure she wore like a second outfit tightened around her mouth. "That's not fair. I'm not their parent." "No," Marcus said. "You're not. And neither was she. but she showed up like one. The rest of dinner was quiet in the worst possible way. Vanessa left at 9 with a kiss on his cheek that felt like a formality and a "call me tomorrow" that both of them knew didn't mean what it used to. Marcus closed the door behind her, stood in the hallway, and understood with a completeness that left no room for argument that his relationship with Vanessa had ended at that dinner table. Not with a fight, not with a scene, with a box of index cards and a letter that a housekeeper wrote because she cared more than anyone else had bothered to. Friday morning, Marcus called the agency. The woman on the phone was professional and cautious. She explained that they couldn't share personal contact information for former employees. Policy, liability, standard procedure. Marcus listened, thanked her, and hung up. Then he sat at his desk for 10 minutes thinking about the kind of man who builds a company from nothing, who negotiates contracts worth hundreds of millions, who solves problems for a living, and who can't find the address of a woman who worked in his house for 7 months. He called his assistant, asked her to check the original employment paperwork. There would be an address on file from when Elena was hired. It took 20 minutes. His assistant called back with a street name and apartment number on the east side of the city. A neighborhood Marcus had driven past 100 times without ever having a reason to stop. He wrote the address on a piece of paper and put it in his jacket pocket. Then he didn't move for an hour, because the decision to find her was one thing. Knowing what to say when he stood at her door was something else entirely. What was he going to tell her? That he was sorry? That word felt too small for what he had done. That he wanted her back? That was true, but incomplete. That his children needed her? Also true, but still missing the center of it. The center of it was something Marcus wasn't sure he could say out loud yet. Because the center of it wasn't about the children. It wasn't about the house. It was about what those index cards and that letter had revealed. Not just about Elena. About himself, about the distance between the man he thought he was and the man he had actually been. He had looked at a woman who cared for his children more attentively than anyone in their lives and had let someone else convince him she was a threat. He hadn't questioned it, hadn't investigated, hadn't asked Elena a single question before ending her employment. He had chosen the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable conversation. That was who he had been on Tuesday. The question now was who he was going to be on Friday. At 4 o'clock, he put on his coat, picked up his car keys, and stopped at the kitchen counter. The box was still there. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he picked it up, carried it to the car, and placed it on the passenger seat. He owed her more than an apology. But an apology was where it had to start. The drive took 35 minutes. Marcus spent every one of them in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the road and the weight of the box sitting on the seat beside him like a passenger he couldn't ignore. The neighborhood was modest, clean but worn. The kind of place where people kept their small spaces neat because neatness was one of the few things that cost nothing. He parked across the street from a 3-story brick building with an iron railing along the front steps and a row of buzzers beside the main door. He sat in the car for 12 minutes, counted them on the dashboard clock. Not because he was afraid, because he was trying to make sure that when he knocked on that door, he was doing it for the right reasons and not just to make himself feel better. At 4:51, he got out, crossed the street, climbed the steps, found her name on the buzzer. Apartment 3B, small handwritten label, the same neat handwriting he had seen on 40 index cards and a letter that had rearranged his understanding of his own household. He pressed the buzzer, waited. A voice came through the speaker, quiet, guarded. "Yes? Elena, it's Marcus Cole." Silence, long enough to mean something. Then the door buzzed open without a word. He climbed 2 flights of narrow stairs. The hallway on the 3rd floor was small and clean. A single light overhead. The smell of something cooking from a neighbor's apartment. He stopped at 3B and knocked. She opened the door, not all the way, just enough to stand in the frame. She looked different without the context of his house around her. Smaller space, simpler clothes, a gray sweatshirt, hair down for the first time he'd ever seen. And her face held an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't relief, wasn't expectation. It was the careful blankness of someone who had already absorbed a hurt and wasn't sure if the person standing in front of her was bringing more. "I found the box," he said. Elena's eyes moved to his hands. Empty. He'd left it in the car on purpose because he didn't want her to think he had come to return it. "The cards," he said. "The growth chart. The letter about Noah." His voice was steady, but only because he was holding it there with effort. "I read everything." She looked at him for a long time. Then she stepped aside without a word and let him in. The apartment was small. One bedroom, a kitchen that doubled as a living area, a single window facing the street. Everything in its place. A shelf with a few books arranged by size. A coat hung on a hook behind the door. A small table with 2 chairs, one of which had a folded blanket draped over the back as if it sometimes served as a couch. It was the home of someone who had learned to live with very little and had made that little feel enough. Elena stood near the kitchen counter, arms at her sides. Not crossed, not defensive, just still, waiting for him to say what he had come to say. Marcus stood near the door. The distance between them was 6 feet but felt much wider. "I came here to say something I should have said before I let you walk out of my house," he began. "I was wrong. Not partially, completely. I fired you without asking you a single question, without giving you a chance to explain anything, without even considering that the person telling me to let you go had her own reasons that had nothing to do with you." Elena's face didn't change, but her eyes did. Something behind them shifted, not softening, opening, the smallest willingness to hear more. "I found Noah's cards," Marcus said. 40 of them, everyone hand-drawn. You made those on your own time." "During lunch breaks," she said quietly. "He learns better with images. I noticed that the first month. And the growth chart. Ava asked me once if she was growing. She said nobody ever checked, so I started checking." Marcus looked at the floor, then back at her. "And the letter, about the bullying." Elena was quiet for a moment. "I wrote it 3 times. I wasn't sure it was my place. But he was hurting and I couldn't just watch." "You were the only one who saw it," Marcus said. "The only one, and I sent you away for it." The room held that sentence the way small rooms hold heavy things, completely, with nowhere for it to go. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he said. "I'm asking you to know that I see what you did. All of it. Every card, every measurement, every night you showed up for my children when I didn't. And I'm standing here because you deserved to hear that from me? In person, not through an agency, not through a phone call." Elena looked at him with those steady eyes, the same eyes that had looked at him 7 months ago in the interview without flinching. But something was different now. The steadiness was still there, but behind it was something he hadn't been allowed to see before. The exhaustion of someone who had given everything to a place and been told to leave without a reason that made sense. "Your children are wonderful, Marcus," she said. "That's what I missed most. Not the job. Them." Marcus didn't plan what he said next. It came from somewhere beneath the rehearsed apology and the carefully organized thoughts he'd carried across the city. "Come back," he said. "Not for the job. I mean, yes, the job is yours if you want it. But that's not why I'm asking." He paused, took a breath. "I'm asking because my house hasn't felt like a home since you left. And I don't think that's just about the kids." Elena looked at him for a long time, not with surprise, with the careful attention of someone weighing something precious against something fragile. "You hurt me, Marcus," she said, not with anger, with fact. "I gave 7 months to that house, to those children, and you let me go in 4 minutes without looking me in the eye. I know. And it wasn't because I did something wrong? No, it wasn't. She turned toward the window. The streetlight outside cast a thin orange line across the kitchen floor. She stood in that light for a moment, and Marcus understood that what was happening in that silence was not hesitation. It was a woman deciding whether the man standing in her apartment had changed enough to be trusted with something she'd already given once and had taken from her. She turned back. I'll come back for the children, because they need consistency, and I made them a promise I didn't get to keep. She paused. Everything else, I need time. Take all the time you need, Marcus said, and meant it. The following Monday, Elena walked through the side entrance at 7:43, hung her coat on the hook, tied her apron, started the day the way she always had, with that quiet rhythm that made the house feel like it was breathing again. Ava came downstairs, saw her in the kitchen, and stopped in the doorway. She didn't say anything. She crossed the room, wrapped both arms around Elena's waist, and held on. Elena put one hand on the girl's head and closed her eyes. Noah appeared 2 minutes later with the stack of books under his arm and the bookmarks still in place. He set them on the kitchen table, looked at Elena, and said, "We're on page 34. Elena sat down beside him, opened the book, and started reading. Marcus watched from the hallway, his daughter holding on to someone who came back, his son picking up exactly where he'd been left, and in the center of it, a woman who had every right to say no but chose to say yes because the two people who needed her most were not the ones who had sent her away. He looked at the hook by the service entrance. The apron was back, the coat was on its place, and the house, for the first time in a week, didn't just run. It lived. He'd spent years building something enormous on the outside, office towers, contracts, accounts that multiplied while he slept. And the thing that finally made his life feel whole walked through the service door with a bag on her shoulder and a patience he hadn't earned but was determined to deserve. Some things can't be bought. Some things can't be replaced. And some things, if you're honest enough and humble enough, can be found standing at a door in a small apartment on the east side of the city, giving you one more chance to get it right. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that the people who matter most aren't always the ones with the loudest voice, but the ones who show up quietly and never stop giving, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already, because stories like this one come every week and you don't want to miss the next one. And leave me a comment, tell me this. Have you ever lost someone and realized too late what they meant to you? I want to hear it. I'll see you in the next one.